Hello and welcome to NYC Health and Hospitals Kings County YouTube podcast. My name is Maria West, Director of Mental Health and Substance Use Disorder Services. Today, we wrap up our month-long podcast for Recovery Month with a recovery story from one of our recipients of care. Frantz is here today. Welcome, Frantz.
Thank you, Miss West. Greetings to everyone. My name is Frantz, and I'm a grateful recovery alcoholic, drug addict, and all the above. My story starts from when I was a young child. I started drinking at the age of 7. My uncle was a drinker, and he owned a club downstairs from where we lived. And every Saturday, there'd be parties. So I would help him play music and clean up. And as I was doing that, I would pick up little drinks on the table and sip, as a child does. So as I was being around my uncle a lot, he used to drink a lot of beers. So usually he'd call me and he'd say, go to the refrigerator and get me a beer. Open it up for me. So I would open it up and I'd take a sip. Sometimes he'd have me light his cigarettes also. So that became a little habit for me. I didn't realize it was a habit because I was a child. I was just having fun, But when I started getting beatings from my aunt, I thought it was discipline, but it wasn't. It was abuse. She used to have me kneel on grades, the cheese graters, the metal cheese graters with a cinder block over my head. And if I was to drop that, she'd beat me. And every time she did that, I would run downstairs to the basement because I knew where the alcohol was and the cigarettes. And I'd take the dog with me and we'll go downstairs and we'd sit back and I'd light a cigarette and drink a beer like I was a grown person, but I was still a young man. And that became kind of normal for me. One day I was sitting at my window and the guys outside used to sell a lot of drugs. They were selling marijuana. And they would run up to the cars and try to sell the people who were in the cars the drugs. And one day, 2 of the guys got into an argument. And one of the guys pulled out a knife and the other guy pulled out a gun. And the guy shot him and he died in front of me. I was 7 years old at the time. And that was the first murder that I ever seen. And ever since then, it became normal to me. I thought that my life was normal. I didn't know that I was suffering with past traumas, with mental issues. I'd go to school and I'd fight all the time. I'd get in trouble. So they finally said that they would have to put me out of my school. So my mother had to pay for me to go to a Catholic school, which I caused trouble there also because it was right across the street from my old school. Then when I got into high school, that's when I really elevated to a next level. Because of the people that I met. They wouldn't give me my zone school in Brooklyn. So they transferred me to an all-boys school in Manhattan, in Chelsea. All right, Chelsea Vocational. And I got to meet a lot of new, different people there. And these guys, they were smoking and drinking. And every morning we'd come in. We had a spot where we went to and we'd buy the 40 ounces. And
How old were you at that time?
At that time, I was about 13.
Did you realize you had like an addiction problem at that time? Or?
No. It was a normal thing. It was the norm. I thought I was living my life normally. I thought everybody did this, And as the years went by, I got into a lot of different things. I was really a bad person.
Let's go back a little bit because I think that the language is when somebody say you're a bad person, speaks to that you're doing something wrong, when really and truly this is a disease that you're developing.
Yes, indeed. But I didn't realize that it was a disease. I thought this was the norm for me. This is the person that I'm supposed to be. Because when my uncles and them used to come over to see my uncle, they would always say to me, why is this child so angry? He has a short fuse. So they started calling me Short Fuse. And then as I grew up, that was my name, Short Fuse. So I had to live up to that. And people were afraid. I thought it was respect, but it was not respect. It was fear that people had. And to be honest with you, I had fear also. I had fear but I didn't know it was fear. I just thought I was a tough guy and people don't mess with me. But in recovery, I realized that all that time I was afraid. Years went by and I started to elevate my get high. I was smoking marijuana, and I'll explain to you why I started smoking marijuana. I used to be I'm still a patient of Kings County, but in my younger years, I had asthma real bad. So I used to always come to Kings County as an infant. And I came so often they called me Frantz Kings County. And that grew with me. Frantz Kings County, he's back again, you know. But one day I was having a serious asthma attack. And I was in front of my house and I was playing music. And I looked up. I couldn't breathe, but I looked up and I saw this gentleman. He was dressed all in white, in a white Ganzi, long African type Ganzi. He had a beard, long beard. He had Rasta hair, and he was walking with a staff. He had slippers on. And he came up to me and he looked at me and he said, "Little brother, what's wrong?" I said, "I'm having problems." I was struggling to tell him that I was having problems breathing. And I realized that he was smoking a cigar. It looked like a cigar. And he said to me, "Take a pull of this. This is Sensimilia, the virgin plant." And I took a pull and I started to cough and regurgitate whatever phlegm was in me. And I regurgitated it, and he told me to take 2 more pulls, and I did that. And then after a while, I started to breathe. So ever since then, I smoked marijuana, you know. But then I met up with a couple of other guys, which started putting the cocaine into the marijuana. And then that's when the crack had first come out. So I started doing that also, mixing the marijuana with the crack. So that was like, forget it. I couldn't stop.
How old were you at that time?
At that time, I was about like 18, 19.
So you were still a teenager?
I was still a teenager, yes. But I was running around selling drugs, womanizing, and all these things. And it was normal. I thought this was normal. And as I went along, you know, I grew up. I was selling drugs a lot. And I left the state. I went upstate to Poughkeepsie. And when I got up to Poughkeepsie, it was a new thing. I felt like a god, you know, because everybody was coming to me for the drugs. And I met this guy, and he had kilos of cocaine, but he had no customers. But I had all the customers and no cocaine. So he gave it to me. And as I was sitting on the table, I was cutting up crack, and I had weed on the side because I had stopped smoking that crack for a while. But then I didn't realize that the crack cocaine that I was cutting was going through my pores, and it was getting mixed up with the weed until somebody came to me and told me they didn't know that I smoked crack. I said, "I don't smoke crack." They said, "Yes, you are. You smoking the crack with the weed." And then after I heard that, it was a wrap for me. I just continued smoking and smoking and drinking and drinking and drinking. I almost got killed. I got shot a couple of times. A guy tried to blow my face off. You know, I went through a lot in my time of addiction, with my disease. But when I went to rehab 3 different times as I got older. The first time I went to rehab, I went for detox, and I went for the 28 days. I did that. I accomplished that. I came out, and I went back to doing the same thing that I was doing. After 3 months, I was drinking and smoking again. It took about a year for me to realize that I needed more help. So I went back to rehab again, to the same place. And this time I stayed about 6 months sober and abstinent, but I relapsed again, another year. 3rd time I went in, they wouldn't take me at the same place, so they sent me somewhere else. And that was the time when I realized that I really have to take serious stock on what I'm doing with my life, because I was wearing a diaper. I couldn't control my bowels. I was walking with a walker. My pancreas had went bad. My diabetes had kicked in. My blood pressure was off the charts. I was about on my deathbed. I was about ready to die.
So this is what you call hitting rock bottom.
Well, for me, that was my rock bottom.
So a lot of people don't recognize it when they see it. So you recognize it and you took steps.
I still didn't recognize it. I was going to the hospital back and forth for my pancreas, for the drinking. I was really bad. And the thing about it is, I stopped brushing my teeth. I stopped taking care of myself. I didn't even look in the mirror until one day I came home and I looked at my mother, and all I could see was her face was puffy from crying. And she's been crying for a long time. And I didn't realize it at the time because I was high. But that day, for some reason, I looked at her, and then I went to the bathroom, and for the first time in a long time, I looked at me in the mirror, and I did not like what I saw looking back at me. And that was the day that I decided that I will no longer put my mother through that, because I'm killing her and I'm killing me. I was committing suicide and did not know it. So I went in to the rehab for the last time. I did what I had to do. 28 days came up, and I said, I'm not ready to leave yet. So I asked for an extension. Within that extension time, I sat back and I said, what am I going to do after I leave here? Because I cannot do the same thing I did the first couple of times. So I asked the counselor that was there, is there any place that I can go to continue with my recovery? She said, where do I live? I said, I live in Brooklyn. She says, well, there's a place called CD Tops in Kings County Hospital. Would you like to go there? I said, fantastic, because that's my hospital. And I came in and I saw a gentleman. He was a serious angel to me. And he did my intake. And from there, it started. When I met the staff was so loving, so accepting of me. They did not judge me. They accepted me for who I was. And I started out with 3 days. And then I felt that I needed more days. So I kept coming back, more days. So I had 5 days. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with recovery because the staff made it so easy for me to understand that I had a disease. I was never explained that before. And then they explained to me that this is a disease. It's an incurable disease, but it's manageable. And that gave me the strength to continue managing my disease. But then after a while, I realized that I had more issues, not just the alcohol and the drugs, but my lifestyle. I had to do something about that. So I realized that if I didn't change what I thought was normal, I would continue to fall and I will die. So I changed my lifestyle. I let all the bad things that I did that I thought was okay, I let it go. And I adapted a new lifestyle. I learned empathy. I learned respect. The first thing I really learned was to stop lying, because I used to lie to myself and to others, thinking that as I lie, I could get away with certain things. And to be honest with you, people know. People do know, and you're only lying to yourself when you are lying. And stop lying helped me to regain my sanity. All right. I had to go to therapy. I have a psychiatrist, a psychologist that I go to, and whenever I have problems or anything, just to talk, I go to them, because in my community, we never knew about psychiatrists and psychologists. If you went to one of those, people would look down at you, yo, what's up with him? You know what I'm saying? So we didn't know about those things.
So those are some of the stigmas associated with substance use, that if you see a psychiatrist, that means you are what the social word of crazy is, which is really not an applicable clinical word.
Indeed. It stemmed from me making mistakes. I kept making the same mistakes and looking for a different result. And that's where I learned that that's insanity. You know what I'm saying? And I learned that if I nip it in the bud, I can continue with my life and continue with my abstinence. See, I had a lot of triggers. Money, women, music, everything and anything was a reason for me to get high. If I didn't know how to identify my feelings, so I was angry all the time. Even when I was happy, I was angry. You know, went to a funeral, we had to drink. Went to a party, we had to drink. Anything and everything. I was happy, I drank. I was sad, I drank. You know, and I stopped smoking crack 9 years ago because a friend of mine gave me a sample. And he said, yo, because they used to call me Fuse, like I said. And he said, Fuse, I want you to sample this. And I went down to the basement where I usually go to hide out and smoke my drugs. And I rolled my spliff and I lit it and I took a pull and it didn't hit me the right way. It kind of messed with my head. I started feeling sweaty and dizzy. I said, wow, this stuff is powerful. So I took another pull. Oh my goodness. My stomach turned and the basement was so dark that I felt that I had to go outside. And it was a sunny summer day. The minute the sun hit me, I fell out. When I reawoken, I found myself in the house. My friends found me on the sidewalk and they took me home.
Was that an overdose?
Yes. I didn't know at the time because we never heard about fentanyl, but that crack was mixed with fentanyl and I could have died. And ever since then, that's when I went celibate. I no longer dealt with women the way I used to. I stayed abstinent and I stopped smoking the crack because women and crack came together for me as one. So I stopped that. And it's been 9 years now since I've smoked any drugs, marijuana or crack. But I was still drinking and smoking cigarettes. And it was eventually like that day I told you when I saw my mom's and she was dying. She was really dying and I was dying. And I made a choice to change my life. And here I am today with a wonderful life. Recovery has given me opportunities that I would have never thought that I would have had. When I got into recovery, I came here for help for me, and I got all the help that I needed. I took advantage of the help that was being given to me. I wanted it. And with recovery, you have to want it. If you don't put in the work, the information without application is faulty. You will never get to where you want to get to if you do not apply what you learn and exercise it and make it part of your life. This is a lifetime commitment for me.
I was going to ask you about what's next in your recovery. How do you manage to sustain it? But you just answered the question. It's a lifetime commitment.
Yes, indeed. And I managed it by sharing. I go to a men's rehabilitation center on the weekends and I teach jewelry making and art, and I share with these gentlemen. Every time I show them how to make a chain or a bracelet, I tell them this is your life. And the beads are different beads and stuff like that. And I tell them that their life is in chaos. I want y'all to make your life beautiful again. Take these beads and this is the string that's going to hold it together, and just fill your life into the string and then put it together and make it beautiful. And these guys do awesome work because they do want their lives to be better.
This is a beautiful story. This is a really good and really thoughtful way of explaining it. Mostly that recovery is possible.
Indeed it is.
And that someone has to make a commitment to the recovery, and you have done that. You've done the work.
Indeed.
So thank you very much for sharing your story with us. And hopefully someone would hear the story and really work hard on their own recovery.
Thank you very much for accepting me. And thank you very much for those of you out there who are still struggling, who's having issues. We're here. We're here for you. And Kings County is a wonderful place to come to if you need the help, because we do care. Thank you very much for having me share.